Woman, empower thyself and listen to The Wet Show. I'm your host, Hattie C. It's a podcast for women, a podcast for men supporting women. Listen as we engage women from all walks of life, share about her business, her experiences, her relationship, her story with you on The Wet Show. Join us in all our social media platforms as we send out live Vox Pops interviews for the segment Streetwise Woman in a community near you. So join the conversation and be the embodiment of empowerment. Hi everyone, this is your host Hattie C, and this is The Wet Show, the Woman Empower Thyself show. Welcome. The Wet Show is a safe space for women from all walks of life, where we journey from pain to purpose, from brokenness to healing, and from silence to restoration. Today's conversation is one that is deeply close to my heart because it speaks to every woman who has ever carried invisible wounds from childhood into adulthood. Most traumas begins in our homes of origin during our formative years, sometimes through intentional acts and sometimes through ignorance, silence, or emotional absence. But today, it's not about blame. It's about healing. It's about forgiveness. It's about naming our pain so that we can break generational cycles and raise the next generation from a place of wholeness.
Amen.
And I could not think of a more powerful woman to have this conversation with than my sister from Hampton school days, Diane Bradley. Diane, welcome to The Wet Show.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am excited.
Great to have you. Diane is a 2-time Olympian, 5-time NCAA champion, Pan-American champion, Hall of Famer, record holder, wife, mother, grandmother, mentor, and above all, a child of God. Diane, welcome again.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I am very encouraged by The Wet Show and your content, especially because I'm extremely passionate about women and girls. That's my life's calling, and I know that's what your focus is. So I'm looking forward to diving into this conversation with you today.
I kind of feel like we have come full circle from Hampton classmates.
Yeah.
How many years ago? Many. And now we're sitting down to have this retrospective conversation about a journey of healing today. When you look at us now, Diane, what feels most different when you compare?
Oh
Just
my
let me have a
goodness.
synopsis.
From
What are you
Hampton
just
days.
you're feeling now?
Yeah, it's been 7 years, something like that.
Don't give it away, girl. Don't give it away.
No, but it's good. It's really, really good. You know, someone actually I was at therapy this morning, believe it or not. I do vestibular therapy,
Okay.
and I was doing an exercise where he threw a ball to me and there was a question and it asked, what would you change about your high school experience? And I said I wouldn't be as self-conscious and so hard on myself. So it's been a great
You were
journey.
self-conscious?
Oh my God, it was awful.
I didn't get that, to be honest.
Oh my God. Hampton was trauma for me. And I talk about it on my own upcoming podcast, which is a journey of healing. And that's where mine started, as you said, back, in my formative years. I often talk about my 10-year-old self, which I affectionately call her. And that's because that's when my trauma started, when my mother left home to go work. And that's the same year I passed my common entrance for Hampton. And so, of course, because of poverty at home, my father's business wasn't doing well. My sister was already at Hampton, and the decision was made for her to leave to go work in Negril. We lived in Santa Cruz. And so coming
Mm,
into Hampton was, and my parents were uneducated, sixth grade education. And so, but they knew education was important. So Hampton and Monroe were the choices for us. But with the poverty that we had and coming into Hampton, the comparison began immediately. And it coincided with my mom leaving home, which started, as I said, the abandonment trauma. But I didn't recognize what it did to me. I just knew how I felt. So from day one at Hampton, I felt out of place. I felt
mhm.
ugly, small, dry head. I was extremely muscular. I mean, I go into detail with all that stuff. I look back now. My sister was there, and I said in one of my episodes, she had what I could only dream of having. She was curvaceous and mature, womanly looking, that kind of thing, and that's what I desired at the time. I was underdeveloped and not attractive in my eyes, of course. And then with my mother being gone, I think that was the major impact. So it was a double whammy. So yes, my experience at Hampton was, I would even say, terrible. Yeah. I went through a period of depression. And so I love the age that I am at now because I finally
Mhm.
know who I am. And I know I can look back and appreciate who I was then, but I can only do that now because I've gone through a process of healing, which is why I'm passionate about, sharing my story and helping other women do the same thing because I know I'm not alone. This is not unique.
Okay. A little bit of tears came to my eyes because I kind of remember back in the day too. I too felt a little bit out of place because I was always at home with mom and dad and then leaving, to go into a boarding institution that I missed mom and dad so much. Sometimes every day I would cry,
Oh,
you know. And I was going through that self awareness, that self consciousness phase as well.
hmm,
And you had to do it by yourself, you
yes,
know. A few good friends around who are probably going through the same thing. So how could they
yes,
help you? you know. So
yeah.
I can relate to that. But I remember you, Diane. Specifically because of your freckles. You had freckles, and I was enamored by those freckles. I was like, "Oh, she has freckles. I've only read of freckles. Now I'm seeing freckles, you know?
You know what's funny with the
So,
freckles, Harriet? See, that's the thing, right? Because my siblings were all dark. I was the only one who had freckles, and I got teased at home. So I was called
mm,
Dundus, albino, all the names, Ready Ball. I mean, just these things. So freckles was not a good thing for me. And because
aw,
I stood out. So it's now my girls. My girls all say, "Oh, heck, I want your freckles." They claim they're jealous, my kids, of my freckles. But for me, my freckles was almost like a curse. So I never. And half
amen.
the time, I really don't even see them. It's like I'm so used to myself. But even my husband will say, "Girl, you sure you're Jamaican?" My husband is pretty funny, but yeah, but it's funny that you would have even remembered my freckles at the time because I felt so invisible at Hampton. I really did. Because I felt inside I was lost. I felt like a nobody. I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt the poverty. I felt everybody was better than me. Everybody was better looking than me. Everybody was richer than, that was my experience at Hampton, honestly.
Mhm. I also thought you were probably hyperactive like myself.
I was.
Because we couldn't keep still, and you
Hmm.
definitely couldn't keep still.
No.
I remember you on the field, the track and field, and I was wishing I could jump like that. And remember, I think we both were in the B stream, one
Yep.
A, one
Yep.
B, right?
Yep.
So we're
Yep.
in the same class, and we had
Yes.
PE together.
Yes.
And I remember watching you. I can see it even now that you jumping and everybody was like, wow, she is as what is that? It was phenomenal back then. I'm sorry you didn't see that. But
Yeah.
at that age, I guess we focus sometimes on the things that are troubling us.
Yes.
So before the Olympian, before the world records, before the titles, we entered Hampton at 11. I think me at 11.
10.
When
I
we
was
passed common entrance. So you have expressed who you thought you were at that time,
10.
and I would like to know though, what did you long for? What were your hopes, your dreams? Was there anything specific? Were, these parts of you that you felt unseen? What were the things that you were hoping for? Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah. I'll definitely try. I think I was tethered to my mother as a young child. And I was very domestic, if that's a good word, helping her to cook and clean and do all those things. And I think when my mother suddenly left, and it was sudden in the sense that, parents didn't discuss things with kids during those times. They just made the decision. That really triggered, I don't even know what I would say, a sense of loss that I
Mhm.
had no words for. We didn't have a phone at home. Cell phones wasn't a thing at that time. So when she left, she was gone. I had no concept of how far she was, when she was coming back, when I'd see her, things like that. So I think what I longed for most during that time was just that connection. My parents anyway, didn't tell us like, I love you or anything like that. So as a result, I felt that emptiness. I desired family and connection and that sense of stability. I left feeling empty, lost. I became anxious, over controlling because I had two younger brothers. My father, who was at home, wasn't being the best father, let's say, as a lot of Jamaican men I've come to know. He had a couple children outside and he was on the streets.
Mhm.
And so I became kind of the mother of the home with two younger brothers and not having that day to day or even week to week. Actually, I don't even know the first time I saw my mother again after she left. So that developed in me a sense of emptiness, anxiety, and I went through, I would say, a period of depression. At Hampton, I felt shut down. I My personality even, I became a different person because I didn't have any outlets. I didn't have any cousins or aunts or anybody to talk to. And then at school, which, you spend 8 hours of your day, let's just say at school, I felt so out of place at school. So I didn't have any outlet for anything. So I would just say I needed a sense of family and somebody who I could have expressed how I was feeling to.
I can actually relate to that, but it's much younger. I remember I'm just trying to relate to what you're saying. I remember when I was about 5 or 4, I was becoming very sick at home, and my father had just become principal of a school, a primary school,
Mm-hmm.
and I was sick all the time. So his mother decided to take me for a while. I wasn't told anything.
Mm.
And my mother, I remember, took me in the neighbor's car. He drove. So he took me all the way to Westmoreland and basically dropped me off. And they handed me over to my grandmother and my grandfather. And it's like mommy didn't want me to see her go. So she hid, and I saw her jumping in the car, sort of
Wow.
a thing, and going. And it was an uproar. Mommy gone, leave me.
Yeah.
So I carried that for many years. And when I tell her sometimes, she said, but Harriet, we didn't know what else to do.
Yes.
As parents, we were trying to do the best that we could. And it was in their way love, because they didn't want to lose me. I was sick all the time, having asthma. They thought that was something in the atmosphere, or so a change of environment would have helped. But it made things worse, sometimes
Yes.
emotionally. When we look back now, we realize that our parents didn't have the tools. They didn't have
Yeah.
the knowledge we have now, to make the right decisions. And they were doing the best that they could,
Yes,
sort of
and
a
thanks
thing.
thanks for
So,
sharing that, Harriet, because it's true, and that's the reason why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing, and I know you are too, because this is not about blaming our parents, right?
right.
Just like you said, they did not have the tools. They're doing the best they could. But it's about healing because we are not unique in this conversation because I had similar things too, where my parents dropped us off in Westmoreland to for the
Okay.
summer. Yep, that's where my parents are from. And I had an aunt that I would spend time with. And I think what was missing is probably the lack of communication because it was
Communication.
like,
Yes.
"You're just a child and you'll be okay."
You wouldn't
But
understand.
yeah, but I think that left us with that sense of, insecurity and just not
Rejection was one of them.
rejection. And for me, what eventually I had to heal from was what I call well, wasn't me who called it. I saw a psychologist at one point and she said, "You're struggling with abandonment." And I was like, "No, I could not use that word. Not my mother, who even though she didn't say I love you, I knew she loved me, but I was like, no, she didn't abandon me." And she tried to convince me. She says, "It's not about your mother, it's about you, and it's what you experienced by her leaving." So
Hmm.
for me, it was I couldn't make my mother bad, so I could not use that word. But eventually, that's the word that freed me. I had
That's the
to
word.
give it a name, and that's what it was. When you need your mother and you're a 10-year-old girl, 10, 11, 12, 13, that's what abandonment is. It doesn't mean she disappeared. She was out making a living, which I benefited from, but my heart was breaking. I was lost. I was empty. And it's because she was not there. So that's why I'm having the conversation because I think it's important that we don't hold on to these pain forever because once I faced it, once I accepted it, sat with a grief therapist and dealt with it and bawled my eyes out and I went through a process. It's called grief recovery. I was so free. I was so freed. I was able to forgive my mother, talk to her, even though my mother has been gone for what now? This year would be 12 years. But
Okay.
I couldn't even grieve her loss because I was shut down because I had this pain, this childhood pain that I carried throughout my whole life. So it's a big impact.
Hmm. Okay, as a high performing woman, we are often praised for strength and resilience. Did you ever feel pressure to always appear strong? Was like excellence ever a place of safety for you? And I'm not saying it is a place where women go to hide. It's often spouted that we hide behind excellence, but I want us to explore that point of view that it is excellence that acts as a sort of buffer for the world, a place of protection where intimate and our soft aspects will not be hurt. Can you say how you feel about
Absolutely.
that?
You are so on point. You are very much on point. So when I left Jamaica and went to college in the United States, my hurt, my childhood hurt, that abandonment that I felt was not dealt with. It wasn't addressed. And even though I became this successful athlete in college, it didn't heal that wound. I felt like an imposter, if anything else, because I went from feeling this insecure, insignificant, invisible child at Hampton, wasn't good enough to where all of a sudden I'm in the United States and everybody's giving me these high praises of the
Mhm.
same muscles and things that I was embarrassed about at Hampton and in Jamaica. Now people are telling me they could pay me for my muscles. So I am so confused and then I'm doing well academically and athletically, and I'm getting all these kudos, but on the inside, I'm still this child that just I was feeling so confused, and so I couldn't accept the accolades, and then my imposter syndrome, what I call an imposter syndrome, developed because people now were asking me for autographs, and they're my fan and all this stuff, and I'm like, who, me? And so I was in my head all the time, but then I began to perform because then there was an expectation. And what I did learn was when I did well as an athlete, I was somebody. When I didn't, I was a nobody. And so, of course, I was more of a somebody because I did so well. And so I performed. I did what was expected, but then the trauma just compounded because I started rebelling on my inside because something wasn't being addressed and I knew I wasn't being genuine, but then I got trapped in this cycle of this is what everybody expects and this is
Mm.
who people think Diane is. And even though on my inside I'm like, that's not me. I'm still this girl, but everybody thinks I'm the superstar. And so you are correct, Harriet. That followed me into my professional career. I left track, what I call prematurely, again, because of undealt with trauma. And I
Okay.
jumped into a sales career, which was, it scratched the itch of track because I had
Mhm.
that instant gratification. I did very well in sales, but I was still being an imposter in a sense because when I did well, I was somebody. When I didn't do well, I was a nobody. So I just learned to operate in that space. And based on the many conversations that I've had over the years with women, there are many women, many successful women who are overperforming, overfunctioning, overachieving because they have undealt with trauma. And so it's like the more I achieve on the outside, what people can see, it kind of, I don't have to deal with the inside because people can't see your insides, right? So they're seeing the hair, the look, the clothes, the success,
Nails.
the worldly success, but on the inside, there are still things that need to be dealt with. And you can't really, I would say, get to that place of complete peace, at least in my life, until I was able to touch and deal with that brokenness on my inside and it caught up to my outsides. And now I know I'm a genuine person because I've healed the whole person. And I think that's very important for women.
Okay, so what has forgiveness meant in your life? Um, was it like at first it started out as a concept, or was it a lived decision? What has forgiveness, look like for you?
It's lived. I'm a believer. I got saved as a younger child, but back then I wasn't, I would say, saved. It was, I grew up in the church and we just kind of did what everybody else did.
Mm.
But I would say the Lord got a hold of me at 26 and I said that's when I got saved, but I still wasn't living fully for him because I was still hiding and doing things and making bad choices throughout my life. But I would say I knew there was a calling on my life when I was about 30, when I had my oldest daughter. That's when I had my first child. And I really got to know Christ over time. And I know forgiveness is, it's a requirement for being a Christian. But in terms of me dealing with my own trauma, it's not as it's harder than than people say. It's not an easy thing, but it's required. And what I did realize, in order to heal, you have to forgive. So even if it's hard, it's something that's necessary. And I think once you lean into your relationship with Christ and realize that forgiveness is not for the other person, the offender, for example, it's for you. You're almost holding yourself hostage when you refuse to forgive people. Then it became easy. It was a decision, but therapy is needed, right? And speaking about whatever the issue is. I mean, some issues are worse than others, but whatever it is necessary to forgive. And so that's a mantra that I talk about at all times. It frees you. It definitely frees you, and that's where healing occurs.
Okay, so Diane, one of the reasons I'm so intentional about these conversations because healing cannot be inspirational. Women need structure, they need safe rooms, they need community where they can process what surfaces. And that's part of why I've been building spaces beyond this podcast for women who are serious about doing the work, not just listening to it.
Hmm.
Because healing has to be intentional for us to break generational
Yes.
cycles. Mm. And we have spoken about generational cycles in some of our conversations. So as we know, becoming a mother changes everything. How did motherhood deepen your understanding of your own childhood? Were there patterns you consciously decided would not continue with your children?
Very much so. Very much so. So I have two girls, and I had my first one at 30. And for sure, I probably swung a little bit too far to the left. So I empowered my girls to speak their minds, to have a voice, to not hold things in, to be very opinionated, and they are, especially my younger one.
Can you imagine?
To a fault sometimes. Like, she's just way too much sometimes, but I love it now because she's an adult. She's 22 now. But it what it does for me, and I won't discuss it here because it's my podcast hasn't launched yet, but I had a major pivotal thing that happened when I was 16 in my life that um I couldn't speak to. I couldn't see it for what it was and how detrimental it was in my life. I'll leave it at that. But when my girls were 16, I was like, oh my goodness, I would have killed him. You know what I mean? So when you're a mother, there's a fire, there's a something, there's that protective thing. I can speak for myself that I have about my girls that I couldn't feel for myself at that age. I feel like even at 10, 11, 12, throughout my teens, I felt like, well, I was taking care of myself. That's a big part of the issue. I didn't
Mm.
have parents who were really guiding me per se. And so I felt like I could navigate my own thing, and I was doing all this, and I was controlling, and I didn't have God. I was doing my own thing, which was not good. But as a mother, now I'm looking at my 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, and I'm like, oh my God, how did you do that? So it gave me these different lenses to look back at my 10-year-old self, which is why ultimately I went back and I had to mother myself, if you would, and have empathy. And I say 10-year-old self because that's a reference that I make of that girl who was stuck. And so I was able to go back and mother that girl the way I mothered my girls. And I still mother my girls, even though they're adults and they're independent. There's just that connection, that mother-daughter connection that it's just amazing. It's such an important bond in life that when it's broken, it really causes a huge disruption. I say it changes the trajectory of that girl's life. And so, because I have girls, and I know God gave me girls for a reason, I'm extra passionate about women healing because I know the big difference that it makes having a healthy mother and that healthy relationship.
Okay, although you said you're not going to get into too much of your, what is it, the mother-daughter synergy podcast,
Yes.
I'm still going to ask you a couple of questions. You know, um, so tell us more about the mother-daughter synergy. What healing are you hoping to create between generations? And another question, hold that one, is how do you repair when you get it wrong? You know, um, let me try and explain it better. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I
When
think
as
so.
a mother, you get it wrong. What
Yes.
what are they? the tips you can tell us. How do we manage that?
Honesty, transparency. So let me answer the first question first. Mother-daughter synergy is about the fact that as women, we're all daughters, all of us. We all have a mother. Many of us are also mothered. So it's not, there's no prerequisite that you have to be a mother. We are already daughters and we already have a mother. And as I said a few minutes ago, the connection, the mother-daughter connection is crucial for identity, for confidence, for how we see ourselves as women, as girls, right? And then ultimately women. So that connection is priceless. God made it that way. And as mothers, we pass on so many things through our umbilical cord to our children, boys and girls. But
Ooh, okay.
again, we're talking about women here. And so what mother-daughter synergy, it's based on are inspired by my life story, and God gave me that name and he gave me the content to go with it. But a big part of women's trauma start in their early childhood, not necessarily at the hands of their mother. So that's not what I'm implying at all, but in their homes of origin, whether it's family members, whatever the case might be. And sometimes, as I said, it's just maybe ignorance. Our parents are just doing the best they can. They're just surviving, but
Mm-hmm.
kids get hurt along the way. And so the important thing from mother-daughter synergy, it's not a finger pointing exercise. It's a forgiveness and healing exercise. And in order to do that, forgiveness has to take place. And so a big part of my podcast is inviting people to know Jesus Christ, because for me, that's a crucial part of that conversation. If we don't know who Christ is, if we don't know, who we are, some of the stuff that I will discuss on my podcast, it would be impossible to forgive in and of our own strength. We need supernatural strength that only comes from Christ. So I'm constantly talking about getting to know who Christ is, because that's a big part of my journey. That's the most important aspect of my life. But mother-daughter synergy is just inviting women to share their stories. And just like you said, I'm providing a safe space, and I've branded the acronym She Always Feels Empowered, Encouraged, um, and embraced. So because I want people, when they share their stories, people aren't, as women, we tend to cut each other down and judge. My thing is not as bad as yours. At least I didn't do this. None of that, right? We're more alike than
Mm-hmm.
different. Our stories might be slightly different, but we have a similar impact. So my call to action as women is to come together. I'm creating a safe space. I'm normalizing tough conversations so that women don't feel alone. They feel embraced. They feel affirmed. And they can get this stuff out. I will cry with you, pray with you, hold you, hug you, whatever you need to do, so that you can forgive or start the process of forgiving and going on to living a wholesome life. There's so many women who are hiding in shame. Shame is a big, was a huge thing in my life and almost everybody I talk to. But once it's out of your mouth and someone kind of catches it and say, "You're okay, you're fine,
Mm-hmm.
you can move on." And it's like, it didn't kill you. There are so many people dealing with the same thing. So as women, we come together, we talk, we share, we are not shamed, we are embraced, we do the work, we forgive, and then we're like, okay, now I can really live the life that God gave me to live. And now the second part of the question, when you get it wrong, I have gotten it wrong, and you'll hear on my podcast, I've gotten it very wrong. I remember my same outspoken daughter, love of my life, said to me, "Ma," I don't know if I should say this, but anyway, she said, "When did you know that our dad was so and so? Like my dad was crazy. Let's just use crazy. Was it before or after you had us?" you know. And guess what? I had to put on my big girl panties and say, "You know what? It was before I had you, but I was broken. My picker was off. I because of my brokenness, I ignore this and I ignore that. and I wanted to have kids, and I had you. So once I took that responsibility of saying, I wasn't pointing fingers at him, I said I was broken. That thing really made a difference, and I am completely transparent with my girls. I tell them of my past. I told them the mistakes I made. I told them they know my whole journey and my whole story, and they love me anyway. And I think that's the thing. We a lot of us hide because we don't want to be known. And I think honestly, the truth does set you free. Be truthful with your kids and and your family, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, that was a mouthful, though, Dan.
Yeah. I
Trust me. I'm here listening and I'm saying, wow, where
yeah.
were you when I needed you?
I am here. There's no time like the present. No time like I'm learning too. This is a new journey for me, but I'm 100% all in. And I'm taking as many people
That's
who
great.
want to
That's
come
great.
along for the healing journey.
Okay, so if healing is a word, Dan, what does freedom look like for you now?
Oh my God. Freedom is, it looks like, and I'll tell you just something simple, right? I'm as you know, two-time Olympian. I was inducted in the Hall of Fame last year. I have all these accolades behind my name. I was still cringing when people tried to celebrate me. I have worked with people for many, many years and never mentioned a word that I'm a two-time Olympic athlete. Why? Because I had shame behind the Olympics, behind my performance, I had shame about all kinds of stuff. And so I could not celebrate something that I had earned. So freedom looks like, now that I have talked about my whole life, it's already been recorded. It has not been published yet. But now I have no qualms. There's no question that you can ask me that I can't answer because I've talked about everything. So there's nothing in the back of my mind that's going, "Ooh, what if they know this? What if they know that?" That's gone. So that's what freedom is. It's peace. It means I am known. Yeah, I'm an open book, and it's wonderful. And so when I talk to another woman about sharing her story or about going to therapy or about healing, I am talking from experience, lived experience, not from reading a book or watching a TV show. I am the example that I am sharing with them, and it makes a huge difference.
What feels different in this season of your life? And if a woman listens and she's feeling stuck, about something that happened decades ago, what would you gently tell her, you know, coming
So the
from your
first thing that
perspective?
feels different, my relationship with Christ. That's the number one most impactful thing in my life, and it has grown. It has grown leaps and bounds. The trust that I have in him. I live on faith. I'm not living in fear, worried about what somebody will find out, what people think of me. So all those things. So that's the number one thing, is just my relationship with Christ and how I go to him on a daily basis, the peace I get from him in knowing that everything I do, my podcast, this ministry, is all ordained by him. And it's specifically the purpose for which I was created. And then what would I tell a woman, which I tell women every day, because I talk to a woman almost every day. I encourage them, but I mostly encourage them by sharing my testimony, because I think that's the authentic thing, because I'm not just saying, oh, it's easy. No, it's not. And so I
Mhm.
talk from my heart. I talk about how I felt, what I did, choices that I made, and what I learned. So it's a journey. It's not as easy, but when you have someone who comes alongside you, prays with you and for you, and supports you, checks in on you, holds your hand, I think it makes a difference. And that's why having a platform like this, and one of the things that I do in my life, as I said, a podcast is just one part of my ministry. I'll sit with a woman who has something super heavy that she wants to share, but she doesn't necessarily want it on national platform. I will sit with her and have her share her story with me. And I'll just be that ear, the shoulder, because I think a big part of trauma is validation. You don't want to be judged. You want people to just hear you out and say, this is how I felt. You may want to cry, you may want to whatever. Um it's not my I don't want to say it's not my business, but it's your journey, it's your story. So I am just being of support. But I will always encourage a woman to share as much as that releases your soul, but be prepared. I mean, some of the stories needs professional help. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained like a psychologist or whatever. But so some people I refer them to a therapist. There are people who I refer to like a coach, a life coach. Um, but other people just really need to talk. They need to talk. They need to get a good hug. They need to get some good counsel. But I think get getting that secret out and having someone listen and say, wow, I understand. I could see how that could be so traumatic. And then maybe give them some guidance into where to go next. And always, if the person doesn't know Christ, I am going to extend an invitation to get to know Christ. That's kind of one of the number one things that I do, because I think that's so important. Whether you have trauma or not, I think Jesus is the answer.
Perfect. Okay, all right. So I want to ask you, what do you hope your daughters never have to carry because you choose to heal?
So we live in a fallen world, first and foremost. So there are certain things I know that we can't avoid. We can't avoid trauma. So all the things that all of us go through, I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of them. So what I teach them is how to deal with whatever happens to them. And I think God is the one who decides their path. And because I know God uses pain for purpose, I don't want them to not necessarily have certain pain, because if not, they won't have a testimony. Without a test, there's no testimony. So I think pain is necessary. I think tests are necessary. I think mistakes are necessary. So that's not my prayer for them. My prayer is that whatever God chooses to give them, that they go to therapy. My girls go to therapy right now,
Mhm.
because of things that we have dealt with in our lives with them growing up. And so therapy feels natural and normal to them, as well as just connecting with me and we talk about anything. So I want them to be healthy so they know. There's so many people who are afraid of therapy. It's like, I'm not telling nobody my business. No, that's not what therapy is. So um, they need to find Christ for themselves so that they can have that walk, so they have that constant companion in their Heavenly Father that they can go to, but also just normalizing therapy and dealing with whatever they encounter in life. You can't prevent the pain.
Okay. So if today's conversation stirs something in you people, if your younger self showed up while you were listening, I don't want you to just comment powerful, because this conversation is very powerful, and move on. The Wet Show is building a private mentorship circle for women ready to break generational cycles intentionally,
Mm.
right? This is not just a fan club. It's not a surface conversation. It's structured, accountable, deeply transformational work. You heard Diane. We have to
Yeah.
do the work, and then we'll see the manifestation of the work that we did. If you are ready to name your pain, forgive without excusing, and build a legacy from wholeness, you can fill out the form. The link, it will be in the description, and we will contact you with further updates, because healing is personal, but legacy is collective, and the cycle stops with us, right, Dan?
Yes, it does.
It stops with us as mothers, as grandmothers, as
Yes,
wives.
and we're stronger together as women. And I always say on
As
my
women, yeah.
podcast, A healed woman is a powerful woman.
So, folks, you heard it from Diane Bradley. This has been The Wet Show, and I will see you in another. Thanks, Diane.
You are most welcome. I enjoyed the conversation.